Hey, good morning, Connection Point. I'm so glad you took the time to be with us here for our daily devotional. This morning, I want to talk with you for just a few minutes about promises. Have you ever had a promise broken to you? Well, listen, if you've got kids, I know that you've had a few promises broken. I promise I'll do my homework. I promise I'll clean my room. I promise I'll take out the trash later, mow the yard later. If you'll only let me do this one thing now, I promise I'll do it later. You've been waiting 20 years and later still hasn't gotten here. So you've had some promises broken to you, but what about you? Have you ever broken a promise to another person? Maybe you said something like, hey, I'll meet you at such and such a place at such and such a time. Maybe you're thinking, that's not really a promise. Really? Did you tell someone you would be there and you weren't? Maybe you don't count that as breaking a promise to another, but I'm sure there's something that you would consider a promise that you haven't maybe kept. What about promises to yourself? This year, I'm going to eat healthy, exercise, read my Bible, start a new hobby. Well, if you did it for a week, maybe it's not really technically a broken promise. What about breaking promises to God? Have you ever done that? Have you ever been in a tight spot and said, God, if you will only get me out of this, I promise I will never do that again. Hey, it's something you can kind of hear muttered across planes as turbulence begins to rock them a little bit. God, if you will only get me to the ground safely, I will never get on another plane. Well, you know that you've already got a plane ticket booked to come home again. You're not going to stay wherever you are. Listen, in case you haven't quite realized it yet, people will break promises. If they didn't break promises, divorce rate wouldn't be as high as it is. Listen, I say all of this not to stir up feelings of mistrust, but I want you to know this morning, there is a better promise. There is one that truly cannot be broken. Hebrews 6:18 in the New Living Translation says, "So God has given both his promises and his oath. These two things are unchangeable because it's impossible for God to lie. Therefore, we who have fled to him for refuge can have great confidence as we hold to the hope that lies before us." The Word of God, which is true, says it's impossible for God to lie. Now, this passage, especially right before this, was in reference of a promise of a son to a very old couple. The promise didn't make any sense, yet God made the oath upon his name. God makes this promise to Abraham, and then 24 years later, when the promise still hasn't come to pass, he comes again and says, this time next year. Now, this passage refers back to the son which was promised Abraham. This was a great promise. The promise of the son came 25 years after the promise was made. But listen, the promise still came. But we have a promise, though, that is so much better. We have a promise of the Son of God. We have a promise of an eternal promised land. We have a better promise. Maybe you personally have been standing on a promise of God for what seems like 24 years. I'm here to tell you the Word of God says he cannot lie. If he's promised you, then just maybe this is the day that he confirms it with the words, maybe this time next week, this time next month, this time next year. Church, let him speak to you today, and don't let go of his promise. Other people may break their promises, but God's promises are better. He cannot lie. Listen, church, we love you. We're praying for you. And if you need anything at all, please let us know. And also, if this has blessed you in any way, please hit the like button. Share this with someone who might just be hanging on there in year 24 today. Have a blessed day.